Welcome to Elevate Care. We're your hosts, Kerry Perez
and Liz Cunningham.
And we're excited to talk to you today about trends in candidate acquisition and retention. So Liz, let's get into it. I guess let's kind of keep it open-ended to start. What are some things that you're kind of seeing right now?
Well, first, can I introduce us a little bit more?
Sure, please.
So, I'm super excited to talk to Kerry about this topic because Kerry and I actually were both started at AMN in a marketing background. And we, what was that, about 15 years ago? Mm-hmm. We were both in the marketing department, and Kerry's now our CMO. And I was over our digital side for a while. So we had a great partnership around technology and marketing strategy. So hopefully we can provide everyone with some insights on what's going on in today's market.
Well, thank you for that lovely introduction. And for you too. And now your current role.
Oh, now I am our Vice President over Technology and Workforce Solutions. So taking everything I've learned on the candidate experience side and really pushing that towards the client experience and how we bring them technology solutions that help them, maximize and optimize their workforce.
Awesome. Yeah. And then right before this, I was over our enterprise strategy. So similarly, it's kind of nice to bring things from across the organization into our new role. So Thanks for that setup. Okay, so I guess getting back into marketing trends and candidate acquisition. And I think we can open the table for, nursing, allied, physician, and anything else. So maybe kick it off with a little bit of one thing that you're seeing new.
Yeah, I think one of the main areas that I think we all should be paying attention to is how we have traditionally attracted talent and what's going to be different about that. And if I think about how we attract talent and what's going to be different, I think about it in maybe two facets. One is around regulatory, and I know that's not the fancy and fun thing to talk about, but there are a lot of regulatory changes happening around how and when you can contact people, different types of consent, and then also around first and third party data that's drastically changing. So, before the world of email blasts and text blasts, that's really gone. You really cannot send out mass text messages anymore without explicit consent. Same with email, right? We used to do a lot around, search behavior and what people were looking at on websites, but, third-party data is oftentimes banned on a lot of sites now, and will continue to, kind of thinking about the way of the UK and the EU and what they've done. Those third-party cookies are going to go away. So the information we know about clinicians and how we attract them is, coming down. So we have to learn new ways to think about what that communication pipeline looks like. The other side of the house is the channels that traditionally clinicians find us and find out about jobs are changing with the introduction of Gen AI. So I guarantee you, if you went and talked to someone who was in their 20s and said, hey, how do you look for jobs? They're probably searching for it on ChatGPT or some other LLM model. And how those jobs show up and how often those jobs are refreshed is kind of a mystery to a lot of us. There's not a lot of analytics around, how often content is being refreshed, how often content is being indexed, and some of the traditional ways that you looked at Google search and organic search, and you knew when your pages were getting indexed by Google, right? You knew what search terms you'd have to put into your jobs to pull up on the job search. Now we're going into this world where we're kind of all learning a platform together as marketers and how we actually are going to use that to attract talent. If you were to Google search right now, nursing jobs in San Diego, there's probably only one or two companies that come up, and even those companies don't know why they're coming up versus another company. So it's just something interesting that we're going to have to find out on the attraction side and what that job search experience looks like.
Yeah, that is interesting because, the LinkedIns of the world, the Indeeds of the world, they have a lot of users still. So I don't think the complete swing has happened yet, but would be interested in, even how I use ChatGPT. If I still might even look up what are the best job boards for nursing. So do you think that is, are job boards a way of the past?
That's a good question. I don't know if I think job boards are going to go away. I think job boards will still remain if it's a good hiring experience. I think maybe the job aggregator type job boards are the ones that I would, predict maybe not being as popular. The ones where it's like a LinkedIn or maybe an Indeed where the employer is explicitly posting that job and they're communicating with you when you're interested in that job, that's still a benefit for the user because they're directly connecting with that employer. The job boards where you're just putting your name in a massive resume database and getting blasted by a bunch of, I don't know if I see that being the way of the future, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
No, I mean, I think, we had spoken earlier in a different podcast with Nishan about just how long it might take for people to adopt things. I do think that there's probably a long tail where it is still the place to go.
Right.
It's still a trusted place that where it can kind of sort of be verified, where even still on, a chat GPT, you still really, you want to trust but verify. Like,
Right.
am I actually getting all of the information? Did it only serve me part of the web? And so that's where it's like, okay, the old standbys I still think are there when you know like where to go. But I agree with you that things probably will change and will adopt. And, maybe even other job boards are figuring out a way to have a better sort of onboarding experience to plug into employers,
Right.
Directly, or to staffing companies and things like that.
Right. Well, what do you think? So kind of going further down the funnel, right? So it's okay, maybe it's a different way for them to find us, right? Google Analytics won't be the only way we find out, how people are finding us. But what about, once someone decides to apply for a job, do you see anything different in that process? I mean, some of the things that come top of mind to me is, how are we going to maintain authenticity and quality in that process when they can go and say, hey, ChatGPT, write me a resume for this job and upload it? Like, what do you think is different about that kind of application process, or what should we be thinking about differently?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think we're in a space where verification is like very critical, and we are very serious about that. So I feel like, it's like, oh, have your robot talk to my robot. There is sort of a risk there of how you validate that. So I don't think that there should be a path where it can be completely self-service, but I do think that there is some points that are important for human interaction. There's some things that do require an interview. There's some things that do require, vetting with a recruiter. But what I will say, maybe a little bit different than what you asked, is I think there are different ways in which people do want to interact at different times. So what I am seeing in this trend of once people apply is that speed is the name of the game of who is first to actually have a human interaction with that individual.
Who's first to make the connection, build the relationship, make the connection.
Exactly, because at some point there can be decision fatigue, and if you are getting blasted by, 10 different people, who are you going to go to? And it's like, well, maybe who did I feel that quickest affinity to, where that brand sort of matters. So it's a little bit of a different flavor than what you asked. So I'll put it back on you for your thoughts.
Is that connection point a digital one, or is it still people are picking up the phone?
I think it's both. I think it's a digital one, but then, I think even in some of the surveys that we've seen, the speed to make a first contact and get to know your recruiter, at least today, that seems to make a difference, because loyalty is, often shown to that relationship with the recruiter. And it's why it's also important to start to build loyalty to your brand, because there are so many other places you can go and look for a job now.
Well, and what I've been noticing is, as the trend and the adoption of self-service continues to increase, it seems like we're just asking clinicians to do more upfront to make our lives easier and their lives easier. What does adoption look like for that? I'm thinking about a lot of trends in the staffing industry around pre-credentialing, or using preferences, or auto-submitting, themselves based on a job coming in. Like, what do you see adoption looking like in that space?
Well, you might even be more apt to speak to that with your oversight of Passport previously, but I do think we are seeing more adoption, but it is probably in particular either like generations or user types.
Yeah.
It's not everybody. And I think even if we step back and take a look at ourselves and what we want to do, if I get told to download another app, there really has to be a good reason in there for me. So I think we're seeing adoption as there's more benefit for it, showing the value that you'll get at that touch point for them, that you'll get that job quicker, that you'll be first in line. So it really is about adoption, not just to get something done from them, but that we're going to be able to provide to
the value to them. Yeah, I think generational, to your point, I see the differences, but then also I see the differences in disciplines and specialties, right? So the clinicians out there that are in high demand, right? They know if a job comes up, they're the most qualified person that get it. They can, get 5 job offers at one time. They're likely not the ones that are doing a bunch of self-service, because they know that they, are slim pickings and they're highly desirable. It's the ones that have a lot of competition. So maybe you think about some of like the med surge or the tele positions, or even some PTs and OTs on the allied side, right? It's the ones where when a job opens up, there's 10 candidates against it in 5 seconds.
That's
like those are the ones doing the self-service. So it'll be interesting does that keep changing as market dynamics shift, or, are we creating the behavior in one group and not the other? And we'll see what that looks like.
Yeah, no, that's interesting too. And, maybe goes to some tech only services out there. It's like the easiest ones to find are probably the ones who you'll be matching tech only.
Right.
So to find sometimes those purple squirrels, or to engender yourself to the higher need specialties or the more scarce, they know that they can be wooed, I suppose.
Right.
I know also with Passport, which is our candidate-facing app, we're starting to expand more into the locum space. What are some of your thoughts or your predictions of either what we're seeing from an adoption standpoint, or what features or benefits might be the most useful to them that might not be what you might see for nursing and allied?
Well, something interesting, if we kind of go back in time, we built a self-service portal for physicians probably like 8-9 years ago. And we built this really robust credentialing thing for them to do. So it was, they could put all their metadata in for credentialing. They could upload everything. It was really kind of all the bells and whistles. No one used it. These physicians were like, I'm not going to take this time and upload all these individual documents. I don't trust where my data is going. I already have this, one guy he literally came into my office. He's like, I have this folder of all these documents. Like, just take it. It's like, okay, that was the reality of what happened. So we probably missed there. But where we saw adoption was around, if you need to enter time to get paid, they're going to enter time, right? So focused on that piece. Now that we moved to the mobile app side for physician, we're still seeing that same adoption on the time entry, which that's kind of a table stakes to me, right? You have to do that. Where we're seeing more uplift in terms of what physicians are adopting is they are more willing to kind of self-serve look at jobs, whereas before they would just rely on the recruiters to do that. And then also we're seeing a lot more physicians be willing to kind of self-schedule once they're actually credentialed at a hospital and looking to do that. Credentialing, I think, is still a beast, and we got to think about an easier way to do that. But I do see the job search and the kind of self-scheduling as an opportunity in the physician space.
That makes sense. You were talking, I don't know, a few minutes ago, just sort of about the communication preferences. Another trend that I'm seeing as it relates back to your point of digital or human is even in the digital communication, having more personalization and making it feel that there's a human on the other end of that communication is becoming more and more important. Any thoughts that you have there?
Yeah, I think one, that's a great space to dive into when you're starting to think about AI use cases and where you can really add that personalization in, which I know sounds impersonal saying, oh, we can use AI to do personalization. But the reality is organizations and, we have done this, we've invested a lot in data over the last couple of years. So organizations that have a really central data repository and really have focused on creating that single clinician record and really understand the 360-degree view of the clinician have been able to unlock value from some of these new AI use cases by quickly digesting a lot of data points around, where clinicians interact, what time of day they interact with, their communication preferences, their generational preferences, and turn that into automated, intelligent journeys that serve up the right content at the right time in the right tone. Like, you can literally these days have one single message about the job that goes out to 5 people and is done at 5 different times of the day on different devices and with different tone in the message. And that's really what makes the difference. We're seeing the more we can personalize messages, the higher engagement we get. Some of these engagement rates we have on email these days are higher than I've ever seen, in my history of being in the digital and marketing space, which is crazy to me because I feel like no one really uses email, that in their 20s, right? So it's interesting seeing just that personalization, and you can create that same connection and engagement with the digital side, just like you can on the human side.
Yeah, really important. Just exactly as you mentioned, a little bit of a nuance, but it's also introducing maybe who they will be talking to, giving a little bit of insight into the personality of a recruiter that they might be working with, of a company, of what their sort of ethos is, I think is another element, kind of rolling into the content that's important. Doing a little bit more like short form videos where you can sort of get a sense for things in addition to everything that you just mentioned are some trends that we're seeing.
That's a tricky one because I don't know if I'm more just on the digital side of thinking about this, and because I want you to push back with me on the human side, but I agree that the human interaction has to mirror and supplement, or vice versa, the digital interaction. I don't know if I'm so sold on it has to be an individual person, because I think there's some inherent risk of that. So I don't know the right answer, but it's like, how do you actually just create the engagement and the loyalty with the brand and the service with the brand? So, hey, I know AMN Healthcare has this amazing level of service, and I'm going to call this number, and I know either my recruiter will talk to me or these 5 other people will. And is that more what you want to do with a digital model versus like supplementing an individual? I don't know.
No, that's a fair point. And I agree that, hey, people change, people get promoted, people leave jobs. You can't really hang your hat on an individual person. So I agree with that with the brand. I think as a conduit to give like a little bit of a insight into it is where a person can sort of represent a brand or express a brand versus be the brand. So it's a yes and to what you said.
That makes sense.
Because even I think as individual users, I like to know that it's not just a robot. That robot might be helpful. And I don't know, maybe some people don't care, but it feels lonely to just think, you're just kind of being put through a machine.
You're right. I mean, and especially with hiring decisions, right? Or career decisions, right? Where am I going to live? Do I trust that this company is going to take care of me? Do I trust this is the right job for me? That human interaction is definitely important. I guess I'm more thinking about like, how do you scale that? Where there's not a single point of failure.
Right.
But you still are creating that trust. So it's probably maybe a recruiter and a team, right? Or something.
Totally.
Yeah.
All right. So Liz, talking about sort of retention and loyalty, one topic that I want to bring up is about loyalty programs. It is something that is always talked about here and probably in every industry, but it feels a little bit, tricky to hit the exact mark of loyalty when we know that some of the reasons why clinicians are looking for jobs, maybe they're trying to go to a specific location to see their family and that job might not be available, or it's a pay rate that is a little bit different. Your thoughts on like loyalty programs or
well, let me I'm not going to flip the question, but I'm going to ask you a question to help answer my question.
Okay.
What are the top 2 brands you're loyal to and why? In your
probably
personal life?
American Airlines.
Okay.
And probably literally American Airlines. I don't know if I'm loyal to like any other brand.
Okay, so why are you loyal to American?
Well, I guess I am loyal to American because of the experience that I know that I'm going to get and because of the frequency in which it is in my life.
But are you loyal to it because you continuously rack up points every time you travel and it becomes this like cycle you can't get out of?
There is a little bit of a gamification of it. Yeah. There is a little bit of I got suckered into, I guess, buying the credit card. Right. And so now I'm kind of like, it's sticky for me.
Right.
And I get to go sit in the lounge before, so might as well.
Right.
It's also within my bubble. The airport I go to is DFW. That is a flagship. It seemed also smart to be loyal to them.
Right, exactly. And I think so there's that type of loyalty. I would also say, there are probably companies that you're loyal to, and I am too, that have like no sort of points program at all, right? So
like Sephora, I guess, not to kind of devolve this conversation into makeup products.
But travel and makeup, that's what it's about.
But it has the products I like. I don't care about the points. They say always you have X number of points. That doesn't really mean anything to me. I like the experience that I'm going to get there. I like the type of products.
Right.
I like the service. I like the consistency.
Right. You could think of like Amazon too. I mean, I know people, don't say, oh, I'm so loyal to Amazon, but it's probably the one thing you use the most. Same with like Uber and Uber Eats, right? The reason I'm bringing it up is because there are different ways you can think about loyalty. There's the points program and the I get more by doing more, which is American Airlines, right? Things like that. There's also the I'm loyal to this company because they always do right with me and they're so easy to work with. I think in our space, it's the latter.
I
yes,
agree with you.
We could get to a space where we're like, oh, if you work this many hours, then you can do this. But just like your American Airlines example, when I moved to San Diego, I had to stop being an American Airlines loyalist because the only other airlines I could fly were Alaska and Southwest. If a clinician wants to go take a job in San Diego and we don't have jobs there, they're going to go find a job in San Diego with another company without us. Right. So there is that like necessity of, there's also clinicians have an idea of where they want to go and they can go find anywhere else they want to go. So I think it's that relationship and that customer service and that customer experience that will help them kind of maybe maintain that loyalty more than just kind of a points program that is nice, but it's not helping me, not go switch to another company, I guess.
And, maybe loyalty, I completely agree 100% with what you said and why that experience and even just getting the basics right, of that consistency. But loyalty might even be different in this environment, which means you will come back at some point. Not that it is, you have to take every single consecutive assignment, but it is like, we are in your consideration set and you have had a good experience to come back. So it might even challenge the concept of like, how do we define loyalty?
Yeah, that's interesting. Like, I haven't looked at the data recently, but like, are the times of the traveler that traveled with us for 10 years gone? Or are people taking less assignments? Are they doing 1.5 and converting? And then to your point, it's more of a long tail sale. We're like the car salesman, not the used car.
I don't know if we're, like a new car place.
A new car place where it's like, I know I'm going to make this great experience for you right now because you're going to come back to me in 7 years from now and buy another car.
Right. And you know what? I'm even going to come back and get my oil changed at the dealership.
Or like a realtor.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not going to go buy another house, but they keep in touch with you. When
That
you
is
are
so
ready
true.
to go, you usually call your realtor.
Yeah.
So maybe we got to think about that long tail game and not the short tail on some of it. I don't know. We're not used car salesmen. I think.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about, acquisition and where candidates are coming from, how they're searching, what might be different. Talked a little bit about once they sort of get engaged with us, the application process, the sort of personalization, human and digital touch points. And then we just sort of talked about retention and loyalty and experience. What other aspect of this customer journey have we not talked about that, might be insightful?
I think just a point to make is the whole part of the middle, the harder part around some of the credentialing and onboarding and whatnot. I do think that's where we're seeing a lot more adoption of self-service and digital. And I think it's the right place to focus on to allow for more of that front end and back end personalization and interaction. So, gone are the days of the recruiter calling to collect the credential documents, right? They're focused on the relationship building. So I think we'll continue to see investments in things like virtual interviewing, virtual onboarding, third-party credential integrations, even like automated skills checklists and things like that. So that middle part of the process is where I see the most adoption, the most self-service, but I also see that as a potential area of risk as we keep adding more and more AI and automation in it to really figure out like, how are you differentiating candidates? I think something that I feel like is really interesting is, during the pandemic, which makes sense, we had to do a lot more virtual interviewing, virtual orientation type things because there was so much demand. Like you could not possibly get through it. We've really seen it, the scales tip back towards that personal interviewing. So a lot more clients are requesting phone interviews. A lot more clients are requesting references, things that like, we were like, oh, that'll be automated in the way of the future. We'll just tell you the right candidate and here's this magical score. I do see us kind of going back to a little bit more old school in that space, which is interesting because that's also the space where you're seeing more AI kind of, have a virtual assistant that does your interviews for you. It'll be interesting to see if that happens in that space and if the quality of the talent still remains the same.
Yeah. And how else we might even think about that at all, At Amazon, they basically have these interview loops, these days where, you just take the entire interview team and you have 30 candidates come through and like interview them all at once. So these interview days, that just might be interesting of where things are enabled by tech, but, you still really need to have that personal
final decision making.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, well, I think we kind of covered a decent amount of ground. Any parting thoughts, or do you want to give us our outro?
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining Kerry and I. We love talking about candidate experience, digital marketing, self-service, new applications. So we're super excited to be able to share some of those insights with you all today. So thank you so much.
See you next time. Thank you for joining us today on Elevate Care. If you found this episode valuable, please consider sharing it with a colleague and subscribing to our show on your favorite podcast platform. You can learn more about this episode and our show on our website at amnhealthcare.com, and follow us on social media to stay updated on new episodes and the ever-changing world of healthcare.